I'm Maya Chupkov, and I'm a woman who stutters.
And I'm Cynthia Chin, Maya's longtime friend, and I know nothing about stuttering.
And this is Proud Stutter, a podcast about stuttering and embracing verbal diversity in an effort to change how we talk about it, one conversation at a time.
Welcome back to Proud Stutter. I'm Cynthia.
And I'm Maya.
And today, our guest is Mariam Elba. She's a research reporter at Pro Publica, where she conducts research for local investigations, which is awesome. And we're going to be talking to her today about what it's like to have a stutter as a reporter and also as an adjunct professor. Welcome, Mariam.
Yeah, we're so excited to speak with you. And I'm particularly interested in your teaching because I can imagine that can be a little anxiety inducing. At least I think so with having a stutter. So I'd love if you can give us just like a brief summary and introduce yourself.
My name is Mariam. It feels good to be on a podcast where I don't have to worry how long it might take to say my name, as it's very often the thing that takes a long time for me to say. I'm a journalist. I'm a research reporter at Pro Publica. As of last spring as well, I started teaching at the Craig Newmark Journalism School at the City University of New York, teaching the research methods class for journalism students, which I found quite rewarding and quite fun.
In addition to being a journalist and being an adjunct professor, what do you like to do for fun?
I love music. I'm a big listener of music. My taste kind of spans from from progressive metal to K-pop. I'm actually in Los Angeles now for the to attend the BTS concert.
I think I know the answer to this, but do you stutter when you sing?
You know, it's an interesting question because I'm trying to think about when was the last time I sang. But I mean, I guess the next time I'll sing is probably at this concert, but interestingly, no, I don't really stutter when I sing. And I remember reading something about how it like involves different brain paths from speaking. So like you don't stutter when you sing, but I also feel like there's a like of course there's like a scientific like neurological component to that.
That's awesome. I had a hunch that you wouldn't stutter when you sang. I wanted to ask you about how you got into journalism and if your stutter had any effect on your career choice.
I kind of fell into journalism by accident. When I got out of college, I applied to grad school to study Middle Eastern studies. I was really interested in like history and anthropology, and the program that I got into was actually a dual program for Middle Eastern studies and journalism. And after graduating, I interned at Democracy Now! For a bit as a social media intern. And it was a really interesting time because that was when I like the internship had lasted through the 2016 election campaign and Trump's eventual victory. So it was really interesting time, and it was really interesting to see how the producers of the show would kind of like frame the news, what kind of voices they would have on, and like how they were different from how like other broadcast outlets were. And then afterwards, I started a fact-checking internship at the Nation. I remember that first week where like they were kind of training us for it, and like there was a lot of emphasis on like, oh, like if you can't find the answer to this, you like have to call the source to confirm, for example, how they spell their name. I remember being really intimidated. The interesting thing about fact-checking is that it's kind of, you're like reporting backwards. You're like peeling the layers of a story to see how it was made. And, you know, if there are any errors to correct, you're just kind of like cleaning up the loose ends in a way. I really enjoyed it. So like, all this to say, I like did not see myself becoming a journalist when I was in college, and not even when I was in grad school, but kind of like various twists of fate have like helped me discover how much I like really enjoy journalism, and that and like specifically the research aspect of it. It's a role that isn't in a lot of newsrooms, but it's, I think, a very essential role, in that you kind of are, you know, filling in the holes that maybe the reporter might not be able to do by themselves.
So it sounds like a lot of the work that you do is kind of behind the scenes. How did you take that leap into teaching at a college level, and kind of going from doing everything behind the scenes to being in front of a room full of people?
You know, it's interesting. Like teaching was another thing that I like just never saw myself doing, because like just too many things to like navigate. And what helped me break out of that was one of my mentors in the news research community, who had actually taught me a lot of what I know now, had recommended me to be an adjunct to the librarian at Newmark, who I also knew a bit previously. I remember getting the email from her kind of all of a sudden, like actually it was nearly a year ago now, asking if I just if I like wanted to be an adjunct for the coming semester. I was kind of surprised that I had gotten that email, because yeah, like again, like I just never like saw myself as a teacher. But like after thinking about it, I kind of just wanted to like give it a try and try to like break out of that like notion that like, oh, because I have a speech impediment, that means that I won't be a good teacher. And yeah, I finished my second semester of teaching just a few weeks ago.
That's awesome. Congrats.
Thank you.
Something that I'm curious about, because as I've been doing this podcast, I've been forced to pay more and more attention to my own stutter. And I only just started meeting other people who stutter really recently. And I find it really interesting that we all kind of have our own way of stuttering, right? Like there's so many different forms. And I'm just curious, like, do you interact with other stutters a lot? And how would you describe your stuttering compared to others?
It's funny. I met one of my good friends is a person who stutters, and we both had kind of like found out by accident. And one of my colleagues at one of my friends and colleagues at Pro Publica is also a person who stutters. I remember actually the first time I met a person who stutters. I was quite young, and my mom was kind of looking for like effective speech therapy, which is something I know that you're familiar with, Maya, as you were growing up. But we eventually found therapists that would kind of like embrace like confidence building as like the primary form of therapy, and like maybe include tips to help get through like really intense blocks, but like with confidence building as like the primary factor. I met people who stutter through those therapists, actually. I went to a couple of the Friends Who Stutter conventions when I was in middle school, and like kind of being in like a mass of other people who stutter, like really helped me like reset my brain to kind of just like accept that this is the way that I speak. One thing that I wanted to mention with regards to like teaching, like the main thing that helped me was the first semester that I started teaching, it was all still on Zoom, and like I don't know about you, Maya, but like I always tend to like get really like especially in like a big Zoom group, if I'm expected to like speak or say something, there's always like a very tiny like oh no moments like in my head, like that like some pretty like big blocks might be coming your way, but someone had given me the idea of like giving the students a brief survey, and with each question I would show the answer or like I would show my own answer to those questions. And I had a question that was like, is there anything that I should know, whether it's some big life event or any special learning needs or anything in general that I should know. And for me, I put down that I speak with a chronic stutter, which means that it might take me a bit more time to speak than average. And yeah, I just like before even the students met me on Zoom, they kind of all knew that I had a stutter. And I think it worked really well because I don't know, like you, like it felt like we, like on both sides, we were able to kind of empathize with what, like, that we were able to like empathize with each other.
Yeah, and I think that's really helped me, like disclosing first. It's really helped me just feel more okay because I know that I won't be expecting them to react with that like surprise, like I don't know what's going on. But yeah, that's always anxiety inducing. But I think having some sort of survey, I think that's a good kind of tool to use for people, especially if it's over Zoom and you're not really able to connect in person one-on-one.
It sounds like a really tough situation. I had a student that I worked with who didn't have a stutter, but there was something going on. And so he was in our adult class and he was practicing interviewing, and the interviewers would ask him a question and he would just stay silent for about 20 seconds before kind of responding with like a 1 or 2 word answer. And so I started working more closely with him one-on-one, and I asked him, what is going on? Why does it take you so long to speak? And he said, it just does. And so I told him, maybe that's something you can disclose at the beginning of an interview. But at the same time, it's like both situations are really stressful, kind of riding it out and just kind of seeing how it goes, but also putting it out there and being like, hey, you might have to be more patient with me. That's also stressful.
So I'm curious, in your reporting and in your teaching, is there a recent memory that comes to mind or interaction that had to do with your stutter?
Just last week, I was working from the office, and I'm still sort of somewhat new at Pro Publica, and like since a lot of people are still like working from home, like most of the time, I haven't met a lot of my colleagues yet, or I haven't spoken to them a lot. But like I was in the office, and I had bumped into one of my colleagues, and like we were just like, I think just office chatter, like what are you doing for Thanksgiving and all of that. And then he kind of stopped and asked asking if like he can ask like a somewhat sensitive question. And I was like, yeah, sure. And like I kind of knew that this was like about the stutter, like you can kind of tell, and like I didn't even like realize that I had like stuttered like in front of him until he asked that question. But I had a brief block when I was in the middle of speaking to him. He was asking me like what's the right thing to do if it takes you a long time to say something, like should I just wait? And I was like, yeah, like that was absolutely like the right thing to do, and like thank you for asking.
That is so sweet.
Yeah, like it's really nice when you get like questions like that. Like I know people feel awkward asking them, but it's always good to kind of be like acknowledged in that way.
Address the elephant in the room.
Yes, exactly, and just kind of like put it like out there. At the same time, like I'm like also thinking, and like these might not even have to do with like having a stutter or not, like because in journalism you might need to make like difficult calls with sources that are not exactly like friendly, and like whether or not you have a stutter, they might not go all that well. I remember there was a story I was fact checking at The Intercept, and it was a story about the really inhumane like summer heat in prisons, and there was a particular prison. Part of the assignment was to call the prison and just make sure that they have not in fact installed any new like ventilation or like air conditioning. And I remember, and it's interesting like the way that I deal with like both like difficult phone calls and any like phone calls like as a researcher or as a reporter is that I try to have like I try to have like this like introductory script like in front of me, so that it's like I'm less likely to freeze and like forget what I need to say if I do in fact block. But anyway, that was a brief aside. But yeah, I remember that I had called this person asking them just this one question and they had just like hung up on me. But like that could also have happened if they like if I don't stutter, like that's a question that they probably don't want to be getting and had probably been getting it from maybe more than one reporter.
That reminds me of when I was working in the PR industry. It was my first job out of college, and my role at that PR firm was to pitch journalists. That was literally my only job, was to pitch journalists, to land stories for our clients who were paying a lot of money for us to get them in publications. So I would call people like Mariam and pitch them stories. And when I first started doing this, my manager, she wanted to listen and make sure I was pitching it right and all that stuff. And that was the worst because of course I stuttered. And she was like, "Oh, did you not prepare?" And even though like when I would pitch, I would be successful, like I'd still be able to like get through my script. So eventually I started showing that I could do it and land stories because I was a very good people person. But my manager's first impression of me is, I don't know if we hired the right person. She, and it was just such it was really tough to get through it.
That sounds like a movie about like a toxic work environment. It sounds awful.
Yeah, I think what helped me a lot when the work got really stressful, like I think in like journalism and like in any kind of, workplace or industry, is really making sure that you have like a good support network in your workplace.
Yeah, when you were deciding, because I know you mentioned you never saw yourself necessarily teaching. When you were making that decision, did you have people who were uplifting you, saying, yes, you should totally do it? Did you have people who were tearing you down, saying, no, this will cause you a lot of stress? What was that whole experience like?
I had spoken to a lot of my colleagues and friends. They had all like encouraged me to just kind of go for it. The stutter is just something that you can address. Like it's interesting. It's something that like I think about a lot, but they didn't think about it like that much. Like as like a way, as like a thing that would like affect my performance, or that would like affect, or that would like that would potentially affect my performance as a teacher. They just were like, you seem to like teaching people how to do certain stuff. You should just go for it and teach in a class and see how it is. Journalism, like generally, like even if you're in a role that isn't, that like doesn't require you to say do a lot of public facing like speaking or like phone calling, it's a really like kind of like how Maya was saying about the PR industry. It's a really a difficult industry to navigate even as like a non stutterer. Like even if you don't need to like speak, maybe you like want to like speak up about things like burnout or like working conditions, or like ensuring that both the newsroom makeup and like the coverage embraces diversity. A lot of different things like that.
And my current workplace, it's the first environment where I've ever had, I disclose to my co-workers right off at the bat, and it's been such a positive experience. My boss is so accepting and patient with my stutter. And so, yeah, I guess our last question for you is, what would you say to an aspiring journalist or someone who kind of wants to get into an industry where you have to communicate a lot? Like, what would you say to that person who has a stutter?
I would say, don't be afraid to kind of go after what you feel really passionate about. Like, if there are stories that you that you're seeing and that you want to write about and report on that you're not seeing elsewhere, you should be the person to do that reporting. And that, like, your stutter doesn't make you any less qualified to be someone speaking in like a public facing setting.
Well, this was such a lovely conversation, and we thank you so much for being with us, especially on such short notice. And I'm super jealous you're going to that concert. I hope you have so much fun. And that's it for this episode. I'm Maya.
And I'm Cynthia.
And you've been listening to Proud Stutter. This episode of Proud Stutter was produced by me, Maya Chupkov.
And edited by me, Cynthia Chin. Our music was composed by Augusto Denise, and our artwork by Mara Ezekiel and Noah Chupkov.
If you have an idea or want to be part of future episodes, find us on Twitter @ProudStutter. You can also find us at www.proudstutter.com.
Drop us a note or share a voice memo. What's your stuttering story? What topics would you like us to cover? And what are you curious about?
And if you like the show, you can leave us a review wherever you are listening to this podcast.
More importantly, tell your friends to listen too.
Until we meet again, thanks for listening. Be proud and be you.